Step 3 in cellular respiration is oxidative phosphorylation. So in this step, we're going to be taking the electron carriers, our NADH and FADH2s, and they're going to be dropping off their electrons at the electron transport chain. And the electrons will release energy, and we're going to be taking that energy and using it to make ATP. And a really important thing to remember about oxidative phosphorylation is that this step is going to be making the most ATP out of all 3 steps. And as far as where oxidative phosphorylation occurs in the cell, this is going to occur in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. And oxidative phosphorylation has 2 parts. So it includes the electron transport chain and also chemiosmosis, which will explain what that is as well. So here we've got a picture just showing you oxidative phosphorylation, and it's going to be occurring here in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. So here's just a better picture of the mitochondrion. So you can see the outer membrane in red, and then in gray we've got the inner membrane. So that's where oxidative phosphorylation is going to be occurring. And you can see this inner membrane is actually folded up, and we've got electron transport chains all throughout here on this inner membrane. And then you can also see in the middle here in this space, that's all the mitochondrial matrix. So that's where the citric acid cycle occurs. These high energy electrons that are being carried by NADH and FADH2, our electron carriers, are going to be passed down the electron transport chain. And as they go down the electron transport chain, they're going to be releasing energy. And they're going to be taking that energy and using that to make ATP. And at the end of our electron transport chain, oxygen is our final electron acceptor, because we've got to put our electrons somewhere. We can't just release them and let them run around the cell because they'll cause a lot of damage. So we've got to give them to someone, and we're going to give them to oxygen. And so if there's no oxygen available, then the mitochondrion won't work and we can't do oxidative phosphorylation at all. So here we've got our electron transport chain in the inner membrane of our mitochondrion, and you can see our electron carriers NADH and FADH2 just dropping off the electrons. And as the electrons go down the electron transport chain at the end here, they're going to be dumped onto oxygen, and that will make the water. The energy that's released by the electrons as they go down the electron transport chain is going to be used to actively transport hydrogen ions from the mitochondrial matrix into the inner membrane space of the mitochondrion. And remember that in active transport, we're going to be moving molecules from low to high concentration. So they're going to be going up the gradient. And that requires energy, so it's endergonic. Here's just a picture just showing you the electron transport chain in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. And in between the inner and the outer membrane of the mitochondrion, this is the inner membrane space. And then here's our mitochondrial matrix here in the middle. So as our electrons go down the electron transport chain, they're going to be releasing energy, and that energy is going to be used to actively transport the hydrogen ions from the mitochondrial matrix into this inner membrane space. And it's active transport because we're going from low concentration of hydrogen ions to high concentration of hydrogen ions. So we're going against the gradient, we're going up the gradient. So we're going from low to high concentration, and that requires energy, and where that energy is coming from is from the electrons that came from the glucose, our food, and as they go down the electron transport chain, they're going to be releasing some of that energy, and that's going to be used to pump these hydrogen ions into the inner membrane space. So here just shows a picture of the hydrogen ion concentration gradient. And sometimes you'll see hydrogen ions also called protons. So they're the exact same thing. So here we've got our outer membrane of the mitochondrion. And then here's our inner membrane of the mitochondrion. And then here's our mitochondrial matrix. And so you can see in this inner membrane space between the outer and the inner membrane of the mitochondrion, there's a high concentration of hydrogen ions. And then in the mitochondrial matrix, there's a low concentration of hydrogen ions. Okay, the other part of oxidative phosphorylation, so we talked about the electron transport chain, the other part is called chemiosmosis. And this involves an enzyme called ATP synthase, which is also located in the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. And ATP synthase is interesting because it forms a channel through the inner membrane. And this allows the hydrogen ions to diffuse down their concentration gradient through the ATP synthase. So this is facilitated diffusion. And so the hydrogen ions will just move from the inner membrane space into the mitochondrial matrix. And the hydrogen ions are just going to go down their gradient, going from high concentration in the inner membrane space to low concentration in the matrix. And so going down the gradient, they're going to be releasing energy. So that'll make it exergonic. And so when they release the energy, that's going to provide the energy for ATP synthase to make ATP. So here's just a picture of ATP synthase, which is located in the inner membrane space. And you can see that there are more hydrogen ions, these little gray circles, in the inner membrane space, and not as many in the mitochondrial matrix over here. So there's a little channel here where the hydrogen ions can just diffuse down their gradient, going from high to low concentration. And as they go down through the ATP synthase, they're going to release some energy, and that'll provide the energy to make the ATP synthase spin. And that'll provide the energy to put the ADP and the phosphate group together to make ATP. And if you're interested, you can watch this short little animation that shows how ATP synthase spins around and makes the ATP, which is kind of cool. And then this just shows again, just your electron transport chain. And then here's the chemiosmosis part of oxidative phosphorylation. You've just got the ATP synthase. Also in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, you can see the hydrogen ions just going from high to low concentration. So as they just diffuse down through the ATP synthase, they're going to release energy, make the ATP synthase spin, and that provides the energy to make the ATP. Okay, and then lastly, here's just a summary of cellular respiration. We've got the 3 steps of cellular respiration, what basically is going on in each step, where it takes place in the cell, and then how much ATP is made in each step. And you don't have to memorize any of these numbers, but just note that oxidative phosphorylation is going to make the most ATP of all of the 3 steps.